Imagine waking up one ordinary morning and, in a matter of hours, seeing your life turned upside down because of something you didn't do. Now imagine finding out that it wasn't a mistake, but part of a larger scheme designed to harm people like you. What would you do? Keep quiet to protect everything you've built, or risk everything to expose the truth? Watch to the end. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. The late afternoon sun bathed the corridors of Oakbrook General Hospital in golden light, reflecting off the waxed floors and creating an almost ethereal glow. Kira Anderson walked with steady steps, her white coat swaying gently as she moved from room to room. Her brown eyes, attentive and compassionate, examined each patient carefully. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Johnson?" Kira asked, adjusting the heart monitor next to an elderly man's bed. "Better, Nurse Kira. Your visits always brighten my day, Mr. Johnson replied with a weak but sincere smile. Kira smiled back, feeling that familiar wave of satisfaction that came with her job. It was for moments like this that she had become a nurse, to make a difference to people's lives when they needed it most. Finishing her shift, Kira said goodbye to her colleagues at the nursing station. "Good night, everyone. See you tomorrow." "Hey, Kira," called out Lisa, a fellow nurse. "Don't forget the team meeting on Monday. We're going to discuss the new care protocol." "You bet, I'll be there," Kira replied, waving as she headed for the elevators. In the parking lot, Kira checked her cell phone. A message from her husband, Jalen, flashed up on the screen. "Honey, can you stop by the market? I forgot to buy milk for breakfast." Sighing, Kira typed a quick reply. "Sure, I'll stop at the Central Supermarket." The Central Supermarket was just a few blocks from the hospital. Kira walked in, grabbed a basket and started browsing the aisles, adding a few extra items to her mental list. A little fresh fruit won't hurt, she thought, putting a few apples in the basket. While waiting in line at the checkout, Kira noticed a man in a suit watching her intently. She felt uncomfortable, but tried to ignore the feeling. "He's probably just bored," she told herself. It was when she reached the cashier that everything changed. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me," said a deep voice behind her. Kira turned and saw the man in the suit, now identified as a security guard by the sign on his chest. "Excuse me?" Kira asked, confused. "We have reason to believe that you have hidden goods in your bag," the security guard declared loudly, attracting the attention of everyone around. Kira's heart began to beat frantically. "This is a mistake," she protested, feeling her panic rise. "I didn't take anything." But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The security guard held her by the arm, while other employees approached. Kira looked around, seeing the accusing glances and whispers of the other customers. "Please," Kira begged, her voice shaking, "this is a misunderstanding. I'm a nurse, I just got off work. I've never—" Her words were interrupted when the store manager appeared. "Take her to the back," he ordered the security guard. "We'll call the police." As she was led away from the prying eyes, Kira felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. In a matter of minutes, her life had been turned upside down. Fear and confusion mingled in her mind, leaving only one question echoing. How could this happen? Jalen Anderson's phone vibrated insistently on his desk at the offices of TechShield, one of Chicago's leading cybersecurity companies. He frowned when he saw the unknown number, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello?" Jalen said, his deep voice echoing in the silent room. "Jalen." Kira's voice was almost unrecognizable, laced with tears. I need you." Jalen's heart raced. "Kira? What's happened? Where are you?" Between sobs, Kira managed to explain the situation. Every word was like a stab in Jalen's chest. His wife, accused of theft? It was inconceivable. "I'm going now," Jalen declared, already picking up his things. "Hang in there, love. I'll get you out of there." Running for the elevator, Jalen bumped into his colleague, Ryan. "Hey, watch it, champ," Ryan joked, but his smile disappeared when he saw Jalen's expression. "Everything okay?" "No," Jalen replied dryly, stepping into the elevator. "I have a family emergency." The ride to the police station seemed interminable. Jalen's mind was spinning with 1,000 thoughts. How could this have happened? Kira was the most honest person he knew. Something was very wrong. Arriving at the police station, Jalen was greeted by a serious-looking officer. "Good evening, sir." What can I do for you? My wife, Kira Anderson, has been brought here. There was a misunderstanding at the supermarket, Jalen explained, trying to remain calm. The officer consulted his computer. Ah, yes. Theft case at the central supermarket. Follow me, please. Jalen was led into an interrogation room. When the door opened, his heart broke at the sight of Kira. She looked so small and fragile sitting there, her eyes red from crying. Kira, Jalen ran to hug her. Jalen, Kira sobbed into his arms. I didn't do anything, I swear. You have to believe me. Shish, I know. Jalen soothed her, stroking her hair. We'll sort it out. A detective entered the room, interrupting the moment. Mr. Anderson? I'm Detective Martinez. We need to talk about your wife's situation. The conversation that followed was tense. The detective explained that there was video evidence showing Kira hiding items in her handbag. Jalen felt his blood boil. That's impossible, he argued. My wife is a nurse. She would never do something like that. I understand your position, Mr. Anderson, the detective replied with a condescending tone. But the evidence is clear. We'll have to proceed with formal charges. Kira started crying again. Please, this will ruin my career. I didn't steal anything. Jalen hugged Kira protectively, his mind already working on possible solutions. I want to see that evidence, he demanded. And I'll hire a lawyer right away. The detective nodded. That's your right, but I advise you to cooperate. It might make things easier for you. After filling out the necessary paperwork and paying the bail, Jalen was finally able to take Kira home. The drive back was silent, the tension palpable in the air. At home, Kira collapsed on the sofa, looking completely exhausted. Jalen sat down next to her, holding her hands. Kira, look at me, he said softly. I believe in you. We'll get through this together. Kira looked at her husband, her eyes full of fear and gratitude. What are we going to do, Jalen? What if I lose my job? What if? Don't think about that now, Jalen interrupted her gently. First, let's rest. Tomorrow, we'll start fighting. That night, while Kira slept restlessly, Jalen stayed awake, his laptop illuminating the dark room. He researched similar cases, laws on false accusations, anything that could help. A post on a forum caught his eye. It was about a similar case in the same supermarket a few months ago. The victim was also a black woman. Jalen's heart raced. This was no coincidence. There was something bigger going on, and he was determined to find out what it was. With the first rays of sunlight streaming in through the window, Jalen made a silent promise. He would clear Kira's name, no matter what the cost. And in the process, perhaps he could expose an even darker truth that lurked in the shadows of their community. The sun had barely risen when Jalen turned on his computer in the makeshift office in the corner of the living room. Strong coffee was steaming next to him, a necessity after an almost sleepless night. His eyes, though tired, shone with determination. Okay, let's see what we've got here, he muttered to himself, his fingers flying over the keyboard. As a cybersecurity expert, Jalen knew that every system left traces. His first task was to access the central supermarket's security cameras. It wouldn't be easy, but he had the necessary skills. After hours of failed attempts and dead ends, Jalen finally managed to crack the supermarket's security system. Bingo! He exclaimed, a satisfied smile crossing his face. He quickly browsed through the archives until he found the recordings from the previous day. His heart raced as he spotted Kira in the images, walking calmly down the aisles. Jalen watched intently, frame by frame, looking for any sign of the alleged robbery. But the more he watched, the more confused he became. There was nothing. No suspicious movements, no attempts to hide items. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, running his hand through his hair in frustration. It was then that he noticed something strange. A slight jump in the recording, almost imperceptible. Jalen frowned, turning the video back a few seconds. Wait a minute, he zoomed in, focusing on the details. There it was. A small discontinuity in the sequence, a clear sign that the video had been edited. Kira, he called out, the excitement in his voice echoing through the house. Come and see this. Kira appeared in the doorway, her eyes still swollen from crying. What is it, Jalen? Look, he pointed at the screen. The video has been manipulated. Someone edited the images to make it look like you were stealing. Kira's eyes widened in shock and relief. But, why? Who would do that? Jalen shook his head, his expression serious. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He continued his investigation, delving deeper into the supermarket systems. The more he looked, the more anomalies he found. Altered records, deleted security logs. This is bigger than we imagined, Kira, Jalen said, turning to his wife. Someone inside the supermarket is involved in this. Kira sat down next to him, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. What can we do? Jalen took her hand, squeezing it gently. First, let's gather all this evidence. Then we need legal help. Just then, Kira's phone rang. It was Maya, her childhood friend. Kira, I've just seen the news online. Is everything okay? Maya's voice was full of concern. Kira swallowed. Maya, things are complicated. Can you come here? We need to talk. An hour later, Maya arrived. As Kira explained the situation, Maya's eyes filled with tears of anger and compassion. This is terrible, Kira, Maya said, hugging her friend. But I'm not surprised. My brother went through something similar last year. Jalen raised his head, suddenly alert. What? Can you tell us more about it? Maya nodded, her expression somber. It was in the same supermarket. He was accused of theft, but he was innocent. He ended up losing his job because of it. A heavy silence fell over the room. Jalen and Kira exchanged meaningful glances. Maya, Jalen said slowly, I think we've discovered something big here. Something that goes beyond Kira's case. He showed Maya the evidence he had found. Her eyes widened in understanding. My God, she whispered. That's systematic. Kira stood up, a new determination in her eyes. We can't keep quiet about this. We have to do something. Maya agreed, picking up her phone. I'll call my brother. He needs to know about this. Jalen went back to his computer, typing furiously. I'll keep digging. There has to be more evidence out there. As the day progressed, the small apartment became a makeshift operations center. Jalen continued his digital investigation. Kira and Maya made calls, gathering similar stories from other victims. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, a disturbing picture emerged. A pattern of discrimination and injustice that extended far beyond a single incident. As night fell, Jalen, Kira and Maya gathered around the kitchen table, surrounded by notes, print screens and a growing list of names. This is bigger than we imagined, Kira said, her voice shaky but determined. Jalen nodded, taking her hand. Yes, but now we have something to fight for. We're not alone in this. Maya looked at the two of them, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and hope. What do we do now? Jalen stood up, his posture emanating resolution. Now we take this public. It's time to make our voices heard. And so, on that summer evening in Chicago, three friends prepared to start a battle that would not only clear Kira's name, but could change their lives and their community forever. The rising sun was painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink when Kira woke up, her body aching after another restless night. Next to her, Jalen was already up, his eyes fixed on his laptop screen. Morning, love, Kira murmured, rubbing her eyes. Did you sleep? Jalen turned around, a tired smile on his face. Not much, but I think we have something here. He turned the laptop towards her, displaying a social media page. I've created a hashtag. #Justice for Kira. It's already gaining traction. Kira sat down, her eyes scanning the screen. Dozens of supportive comments filled the page, many sharing similar stories. Wow, she whispered, a mixture of hope and apprehension in her voice. That's amazing and scary at the same time. The sound of the doorbell interrupted her thoughts. It was Maya, carrying a box of donuts and a determined expression. Ready for the next step? She asked, placing the box on the kitchen table. The three of them gathered around, discussing strategies between bites of sugary donuts. Maya had contacted her brother, who agreed to share her story publicly. We need to amplify these voices, Jalen said, typing furiously on his laptop. The more people we get talking, the harder it will be for them to ignore us. Kira nodded, picking up her phone. I'll call some fellow nurses. Maybe we can organize a vigil in front of the hospital. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Kira and Maya made calls, organizing a support network, while Jalen continued his digital investigation, digging up more evidence of manipulation. Around midday, Kira's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, hesitantly. "Mrs. Anderson? This is Olivia Reeves from WCHI News. We'd like to interview you about the charges and the social media campaign." Kira's heart raced. She looked at Jalen and Maya, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," Kira replied, her voice firm. "I'm willing to tell my story." The reporter arrived 2 hours later, accompanied by a cameraman. Kira, Jalen and Maya sat on the sofa, ready to share their truth with the world. "Mrs. Anderson," Olivia began, "can you tell us what happened that night in the supermarket?" Kira took a deep breath, finding strength in Jalen's grip. "I was falsely accused of theft. But this is more than a misunderstanding. It's part of a systematic pattern of discrimination." As Kira recounted her experience, Jalen and Maya added details about the investigation and similar cases. Olivia's eyes widened with each new revelation. "This is shocking," the reporter said, visibly shaken. "Do you have proof of these manipulations?" Jalen nodded, showing the files on his laptop. "We have evidence of video editing, altered records, and a growing list of victims." The interview lasted almost 2 hours. When the reporting team finally left, Kira sat down, exhausted but determined. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked, looking at Jalen and Maya. "Absolutely," Maya replied, hugging her friend. "Your words will give others the courage to speak out." Jalen agreed, but his expression was serious. "But we need to prepare ourselves. This is going to attract a lot of attention, not all of it positive." As if to confirm his words, Kira's phone rang again. It was Lisa, her colleague from the hospital. "Kira, what's going on? The hospital director is furious about all this publicity." Kira felt a knot in her stomach. "Lisa, I can explain." "You don't have to," Lisa interrupted her. "Just be careful, okay? A lot of people here are on your side." After hanging up, Kira looked at Jalen and Maya, her determination mixed with fear. "What now?" Jalen hugged her, his voice firm. "Now, we prepare for the storm. But remember, we're not alone in this fight." Maya took his hands. "Exactly. We're stronger together." That night, as the report aired, the phone kept ringing. Messages of support flooded social media, but there were also voices of criticism and doubt. Kira, Jalen and Maya stayed up late, answering messages, thanking supporters and planning the next steps. When they finally went to sleep, exhausted but hopeful, Kira looked out of the window at the city lights. "Our voices will not be silenced," she whispered to herself. "The truth will prevail." And with that thought, she fell asleep, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. But for the first time since the incident, Kira felt that she had the power to change her story, and perhaps that of many others. Dawn brought with it a new reality for Kira, Jalen and Maya. The previous night's televised interview had unleashed a media storm that none of them were fully prepared to face. Kira woke up to the insistent sound of notifications on her cell phone. Messages of support were mixed with hateful comments and veiled threats. She felt a knot in her stomach as she read some of them. "Jalen," she called, her voice shaking. "I think we need some help." Jalen, who was already up browsing the internet, nodded gravely. "I know. I've already contacted a lawyer specializing in civil rights. He'll be here in an hour." The intercom rang, making them both jump. It was Maya, looking exhausted but determined. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, entering the apartment. "It's everywhere." They turned on the TV, where a local anchor was reporting on the latest developments. The accusation of racial discrimination against Central Supermarket has gained national proportions after nurse Kira Anderson shared her story. The store vehemently denies the accusations and promises to take legal action against what they call unfounded defamation. Kira felt her legs go weak and sat down heavily on the sofa. "Are they going to sue us?" Before anyone could answer, a firm knock sounded on the door. It was Marcus Holloway, the lawyer Jalen had contacted. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted, his imposing presence filling the room. "It looks like we have a lot of work ahead of us." For the next few hours, Marcus listened intently as the trio recounted the events of the last few days. He took notes furiously, occasionally asking incisive questions. "What you have is powerful," Marcus finally declared. "But we need to be strategic. Central Supermarket has resources, and they're going to fight dirty." While they were discussing legal strategies, Kira's cell phone rang. It was her hospital supervisor. "Kira," his voice sounded tense. We need to talk. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Kira hung up, her face pale. They want to see me at the hospital. I think I might lose my job. Maya hugged her tightly. We're not going to let that happen. You didn't do anything wrong. Marcus intervened. Kira, don't go alone. I'll go with you as your legal representative. The afternoon at the hospital was tense. Kira and Marcus sat in front of the supervisor and a representative from the Human Resources Department. Kira, the supervisor began, uncomfortable. We understand that you're going through a difficult situation, but the negative publicity is affecting the hospital. Some patients have expressed concerns. Kira felt tears of anger forming. Concerns about what? About being treated by someone who fights against injustice. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder, calming her down, before addressing the hospital representatives. Gentlemen, I hope you are aware of the legal implications of any discriminatory action against my client. The meeting ended in a tense standoff, with Kira being placed on administrative leave until the situation is resolved. Back at the apartment, Kira collapsed on the sofa, emotionally exhausted. Jalen sat down next to her, holding her hand. It's not fair, she whispered. I'm being punished for telling the truth. Maya, who had been researching while they were away, approached with her laptop. Guys, I think I've found something. Look at this. She showed an online forum where several people were sharing similar experiences of false accusations, not just in the central supermarket, but in several stores of the same chain in different cities. This is bigger than we imagined, Jalen muttered, his eyes scanning the stories. Marcus, who was still with them, nodded thoughtfully. This could be the key to turning Kira's case into a class action. It shows a systematic pattern of behavior. While they were discussing the implications of this discovery, a notification appeared on Kira's cell phone. It was a message from an unknown number. I know what happened to you. You're not alone. I have information that could help. Meet me tomorrow at Millennium Park, near Cloudgate, at 2 p.m. Come alone. Kira showed the message to the others, a mixture of hope and apprehension in her eyes. It could be a trap, Jalen warned. Or it could be our chance to turn the tables, Maya argued. Marcus pondered for a moment. Go, but not alone. We'll be close by, watching. As night fell, the group split up, each carrying the weight of the decisions made and the battles to come. Kira lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, her mind full of possibilities and fears. Tomorrow, she thought, could be the day that changed everything. For better or for worse, only time would tell. But one thing was certain, there was no turning back. The fight for truth and justice had only just begun, and Kira was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The midday sun bathed Millennium Park in golden light, reflecting off the mirrored surface of the Cloudgate, better known as the Bean. Kira arrived at the meeting place almost an hour early, her heart beating fast in her chest. Dressed casually in jeans and a simple t-shirt, she tried to blend in with the crowd of tourists and locals enjoying the sunny day. A few meters away, Jalen and Maya were strategically positioned, pretending to be a couple taking photos. Can you hear me? Kira murmured into the small microphone hidden in her collar. Loud and clear, Jalen's voice answered in her ear. Remember, any sign of danger and we'll intervene immediately. As the clock approached 2 p.m., Kira felt her anxiety rise. Her eyes scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who seemed to be looking for her. At exactly 2 p.m., a middle-aged woman with gray hair approached. She wore a well-cut suit and carried a leather briefcase. Mrs. Anderson? The woman asked in a low voice. Kira nodded, tense. Yes, it's me. The woman smiled slightly. My name is Eleanor Reeves. I'm a former employee of the legal department of the central supermarket chain. Kira's eyes widened in surprise. Do you know anything about what happened to me? Eleanor looked around nervously before answering. I know more than I'd like to. What happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of an unofficial company policy. Kira felt her stomach turn. Policy? Eleanor opened her briefcase and handed Kira a USB stick. Here are internal documents, emails and records that prove the company has systematically targeted minorities with false accusations of theft. It's a tactic to intimidate and discourage certain types of customers. Kira's hands were shaking as she picked up the USB stick. Why are you helping me? Eleanor's face contorted into an expression of guilt and determination. Because I was part of it for a long time. I helped cover up cases like yours. I can't live with that guilt any longer." Just then, Jalen and Maya approached, no longer able to contain their curiosity and concern. "Kira, is everything all right?" Jalen asked, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Eleanor took a step back, alarmed. "Who are they? You said you'd come alone." "It's okay," Kira assured her quickly. "They're my husband and my best friend. They're helping me in this fight." Eleanor relaxed a little, but still looked nervous. "You don't understand the risk I'm taking. If they find out I talked to you." Maya approached, her voice soft and reassuring. "We'll protect your identity. Your courage can help many people." Eleanor nodded slowly. "There's more. The company has connections with some local authorities. They encourage the police not to investigate too deeply when accusations against the store arise." Jalen clenched his fists, his expression a mixture of anger and determination. "That explains why it was so hard to get them to listen to us." Kira, still holding the USB stick as if it were a precious treasure, looked into Eleanor's eyes. "What should we do now?" Eleanor sighed deeply. "Use the information wisely. You'll have to take on not just the company, but an entire system. It won't be easy." Before they could ask any more questions, Eleanor looked at her watch. "I have to go. I've stayed long enough. Good luck, Mrs. Anderson. I hope you achieve what I never had the courage to do. Expose the truth." With that, she turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Kira, Jalen and Maya stunned by the magnitude of the information they had just received. "We need to show this to Marcus immediately," Jalen said, breaking the silence. Maya nodded, but her face showed concern. "This is bigger than we imagined. Are we really prepared for what lies ahead?" Kira looked at the USB stick in her hand and then at her friends. Her expression was one of sheer determination. "We have no choice. We can't back down now. Too many people are depending on us to do the right thing." As they walked out of the park, the shadow of Cloudgate loomed over them, like a silent reminder of the weight of the truth they now carried. The road ahead would be difficult, but Kira knew that with Jalen, Maya and the truth by their side, they had a chance to make a difference. As they drove away, Kira couldn't help but look back, half expecting to see Eleanor again. But the woman had disappeared, taking her secrets with her and leaving behind a fragile but powerful hope for justice. Marcus Holloway's office was buzzing with activity. Kira, Jalen and Maya gathered around a large monitor, watching as the lawyer meticulously analyzed the documents provided by Eleanor. "This is extraordinary," Marcus muttered, his eyes quickly scanning the lines of text. "We have evidence here of a systematic conspiracy that goes far beyond a single incident." Kira felt a shiver run down her spine. "What exactly do these documents reveal, Marcus?" The lawyer leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "Internal memos detailing an unofficial, client control policy. Emails discussing how to cover up incidents like yours, Kira. Financial records showing payments to certain police officers to expedite investigations." Jalen slammed his fist on the table, his frustration palpable. "That's disgusting. How could they get away with this for so long?" Maya, who had been silently absorbing the information, spoke up, "Because they had power and the victims didn't." Until now, Marcus nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. "Exactly. With this evidence, we can not only clear Kira's name, but potentially bring down an entire network of corruption." "What about Eleanor?" Kira asked, concern evident in her voice. "She risked a lot to help us." "We'll protect her identity as much as possible," Marcus assured. "But she could be a crucial witness if this goes to trial." The group spent the next few hours plotting a strategy. Marcus suggested a two-pronged approach: legal action against Central Supermarket and a media campaign to expose the truth to the public. While they were discussing the next steps, Kira's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered hesitantly. "Mrs. Anderson," a deep, masculine voice sounded on the other end. "This is Robert Lawson, CEO of Central Supermarket. I'd like to arrange a meeting with you. In private." Kira felt her heart racing. She put the phone on speaker so that everyone could hear. "Mr. Lawson, I'm not sure I should talk to you without my lawyer present." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I understand your hesitation, Mrs. Anderson. But I believe we could resolve this situation amicably, without the need for further negative publicity." Marcus gestured to Kira, indicating that she should continue the conversation. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Lawson? Kira asked, trying to keep her voice steady. A settlement, generous financial compensation, a public retraction of the accusation against you, and a guarantee that your job at the hospital won't be affected. Kira exchanged glances with the others in the room. The offer was tempting, but something didn't seem right. And in return? She asked. Just that you drop your charges and sign a confidentiality agreement. Simple as that. Marcus shook his head vehemently, signaling Kira to refuse. Mr. Lawson, Kira replied, her voice gaining strength. I appreciate your offer, but this isn't just about me. It's about all the people who have been unfairly accused and bullied by your company. I can't just ignore it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Lawson spoke again, his voice had lost all cordiality. Anderson, you have no idea what you're getting into. I suggest you reconsider carefully. There's a lot at stake here. Are you threatening me, Mr. Lawson? Kira asked, her voice trembling slightly. Consider it a friendly warning. Good afternoon, Mrs. Anderson. The line went silent. Kira looked at the others, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. Marcus was the first to break the silence. That changes everything. They're scared, which means they know we've got something solid. But it also means they're going to fight even harder, Jalen observed, putting a protective arm around Kira. Maya stood up, her expression resolute. Then we'll fight harder. We can't back down now. Kira nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. What do we do now? Marcus began to gather the documents scattered on the table. Now we prepare our offensive. We'll file the lawsuit tomorrow and schedule a press conference. It's time to take this fight to the court of public opinion. As the group prepared to leave the office, Kira paused for a moment, looking out of the window at the city outside. The approaching storm wasn't just metaphorical. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, foreshadowing heavy rain. Are we doing the right thing? She asked softly, more to herself than to the others. Jalen moved closer, intertwining his fingers with hers. We are, love. Sometimes the right thing is also the hardest. With one last look at the city that would soon become the battleground of her fight for justice, Kira took a deep breath and turned to her allies. The storm was coming, but they were ready to face it together. The next morning dawned gray and stormy, as if the sky itself reflected the turbulence that was about to unfold. Kira woke up early, her eyes heavy from a bad night's sleep. Next to her, Jalen was already up, checking the latest news on his tablet. It's everywhere, he muttered, passing the device to Kira. The headlines screamed out in bold letters. Scandal at Central Supermarket. Accusations of systematic discrimination. And, former employee reveals corruption scheme at large supermarket network. Kira felt his stomach turn. It was real. There was no turning back. The intercom rang, making them jump. It was Maya, accompanied by Marcus. Have you seen the news? Maya asked as soon as she entered, her eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Marcus, ever the professional, already had his phone in hand. I've had calls from at least 5 major news networks wanting interviews. The press conference is scheduled for 2 p.m. We need to get ready. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Kira rehearsed her statement, with Marcus coaching her on how to answer difficult questions. Jalen and Maya worked behind the scenes, coordinating with other activists and victims who had come forward after the first news. At 1:30 p.m., the group arrived at the hotel where the press conference was to be held. The lobby was packed with journalists, cameras, and onlookers. Kira felt her heart race at the sight of the crowd. Remember, Marcus whispered as they walked to the conference hall, stay firm, but compassionate. You are the voice of many who cannot speak. Kira nodded, squeezing Jalen's hand for strength. The press conference started promptly at 2 p.m. Marcus opened with a formal statement, detailing the accusations against Central Supermarket and announcing the lawsuit. Then it was time for Kira to speak. She approached the microphone, her hands shaking slightly. Looking at the room full of expectant faces, Kira took a deep breath and began. My name is Kira Anderson. I am a nurse, a wife, a friend and, above all, a human being who deserves dignity and respect. What happened to me at the Central Supermarket was not just a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was the result of a system designed to intimidate and discriminate against people based on the color of their skin. His voice gained strength as he continued, sharing not only his story, but those of so many others who had suffered similar injustices. The journalists' questions came in quick succession. Kira answered calmly and clearly, her determination evident in every word. Suddenly, a commotion at the back of the room caught everyone's attention. Robert Lawson, the CEO of Central Supermarket, entered accompanied by a team of lawyers. "Mrs. Anderson," Lawson called out, his voice echoing through the room, "these charges are unfounded and defamatory. We have proof of your guilt and—" Marcus quickly intervened. "Mr. Lawson, this is not the appropriate forum for—" But Kira held up her hand, silencing them both. With a calm that surprised even herself, she addressed Lawson directly. "Mr. Lawson, for years your company has benefited from the silence and fear of its victims. That time is over. We have the evidence, we have the stories and, most importantly, we have the truth on our side. If you have something to say, let it be in court." A murmur of approval ran through the room. Lawson, visibly shaken, backed away and left quickly, followed by his lawyers. The press conference continued for another hour, with Kira, Marcus and even Maya and Jalen answering questions. When it was finally over, Kira felt exhausted, but strangely energized. Back at the apartment, the group gathered to assess the impact of the day. "You were amazing, Kira," Maya said, hugging her friend. Jalen agreed, pride evident in his eyes. "You showed them who you really are." Marcus, ever the pragmatist, was already on his phone. "The reactions are mostly positive. But the fight is far from over. Supermercado Central is going to hit back with everything it's got." As if to confirm his words, Kira's phone rang. It was her supervisor from the hospital. "Kira," he said, his voice tense. "The hospital board wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're considering your resignation due to negative publicity." Kira's heart sank. It was the price she feared she would have to pay. Jalen, noticing her expression, took her hand. "Hey, no matter what happens, we're in this together. You did the right thing." Kira looked at her husband, Maya and Marcus. Despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt a surge of gratitude and determination. "Yes," she said, squeezing Jalen's hand. "We did the right thing. And we're going to keep doing it." As night fell over Chicago, Kira knew they were in the eye of the hurricane. The storm hadn't passed yet, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. The fight would be long and hard, but with the truth and her loved ones by her side, she was ready to face whatever came. The day dawned with a fine, persistent rain, as if the sky itself were weeping for the battle to come. Kira got up early, mentally preparing herself for the meeting at the hospital. Jalen, who had barely slept, was already in the kitchen preparing a strong coffee. "You don't have to go alone," he said, handing Kira a steaming cup. She smiled weakly, grateful for the support. "I know, but it's something I need to face on my own." The drive to the hospital was silent, the tension palpable in the air. On arrival, Kira was immediately ushered into the boardroom. Seated around the large mahogany table were the hospital's director, Dr. Richard Palmer, members of the board and a representative from the Human Resources Department. "Mrs. Anderson, please have a seat, drive," Palmer indicated, his tone formal and distant. Kira settled down, feeling the weight of all the stares on her. "Kira, drive," Palmer began. "We understand that you've been through a difficult situation. However, the negative publicity generated by your actions is seriously affecting the hospital's reputation." "My actions?" Kira interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "Doctor, I've been the victim of discrimination and I'm fighting for justice. How can this be negative for the hospital?" One of the board members, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, intervened. "Mrs. Anderson, we understand your position, but you must understand that a hospital cannot afford controversy. Patients are questioning whether they can trust a nurse involved in a public scandal." Kira felt a wave of indignation rise up inside her. "Scandal? I'm exposing a systematic injustice. Shouldn't this be a source of pride for the hospital? To show that its employees are fighting against discrimination?" The HR representative snorted, uncomfortable. "Unfortunately, not everyone sees it that way. We've received several complaints and threats of lawsuits from patients who feel uncomfortable with your presence." Dr. Palmer sighed heavily. "Kira, You're an excellent nurse. Your record here is impeccable. But we have to think of the greater good of the hospital. Kira felt tears of frustration forming in her eyes, but held them back. And what is the board's decision? There was a moment of tense silence before Drive. Palmer answered. We're offering 2 paths. Unpaid leave until this whole situation is resolved, or my resignation, Kira added, her voice surprisingly firm. The silence that followed was deafening. Kira looked at every face around the table, searching for some sign of support, but finding only uncomfortable or indifferent expressions. Finally, she stood up, straightening her shoulders. You don't have to worry about firing me. I'll quit. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Kira, please reconsider, Drive. Palmer began, but she interrupted him. No, doctor. I became a nurse to care for people, to make a difference. And that's exactly what I'm doing now, fighting injustice. If this hospital can't support that, then it's not the place for me. With those words, Kira turned and left the room, leaving a stunned silence behind. In the corridor, away from the council's gaze, Kira finally allowed the tears to fall. Years of dedication, sleepless nights caring for patients, it all seemed to have been in vain. But deep down in her heart, she knew she had made the right choice. On leaving the hospital, Kira found a surprise waiting for her. Jalen, Maya and a group of nurses and doctors were gathered at the entrance, holding placards of support. We're with you, Kira, shouted a young nurse. Justice for Kira, echoed another. Jalen approached, wrapping her in a tight hug. I knew you shouldn't face this alone. Maya joined in the hug. We heard about the meeting and we couldn't stand by. Kira, overcome with emotion, looked at the group of supporters. But, what about your jobs? An older doctor stepped forward. Some principles are more important than a job, Kira. You've shown us that. At that moment, surrounded by friends, colleagues and strangers who cared, Kira felt a wave of renewed strength. Yes, she had lost her job, but she had gained something much more valuable. The certainty that she was on the right path. As the group dispersed, promising to continue the fight, Kira, Jalen and Maya walked together in the fine rain. What do we do now? Maya asked. Kira looked up at the sky, feeling the raindrops on her face mix with her tears. Now we fight harder than ever. Because it's not just about me anymore. It's about all of us. And so, with a heavy heart but renewed determination, Kira turned her back on the hospital that had been her second home for years, ready to face the next chapter in her fight for justice. 6 months had passed since that rainy day when Kira left the hospital. Fall had given way to winter, and now the first signs of spring were beginning to emerge in Chicago. It was a Saturday morning when Kira, Jalen and Maya gathered in Marcus Holloway's office, anxiously awaiting the news that would change their lives forever. Marcus entered the room, his normally serious face now displaying a broad smile. We did it, he announced, brandishing a sheaf of papers. The judge accepted our class action against Central Supermarket. What's more, the Justice Department is opening a federal investigation into the company's discriminatory practices. The room erupted in shouts of joy and emotional hugs. Kira felt tears of relief and happiness streaming down her face as Jalen hugged her tightly. This wouldn't have been possible without you, Kira, Maya said, holding her friend's hands. Your courage inspired so many people to speak out. Indeed, in the months following the press conference, hundreds of victims had come forward, sharing similar stories of discrimination and injustice. What had started as one woman's struggle had turned into a national movement. And it doesn't stop there, Marcus continued, his enthusiasm palpable. We've received a proposal for a settlement. Central Supermarket is willing to pay substantial compensation to all the victims, implement anti-discrimination training programs and create a fund to support social justice initiatives in the affected communities. Kira was momentarily speechless, absorbing the impact of this news. It's more than I ever imagined, she finally managed to say. Jalen squeezed her hand, pride evident in his eyes. You made it happen, love. You didn't give up, even when all seemed lost. The conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Kira's phone. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Hello, Mrs. Anderson? This is Dr. Palmer from Oakbrook General Hospital. Kira felt her heart racing. Dr. Palmer, how can I help you? There was a pause on the other end of the line before the doctor continued. Kira, we made a mistake. The board met yesterday and we unanimously decided that we would like to offer you your job back. In fact, we'd like to create a new position for you, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the hospital. Kira was momentarily speechless, looking at her friends who were watching her curiously. Your struggle has made us realize that we need to do more, Drive, Palmer continued. We want you to help us implement real change, to ensure that our hospital is a truly inclusive and fair place for everyone. Tears of emotion welled up in Kira's eyes. Dr. Palmer, I don't know what to say. Tell her you'll think about it, he replied gently. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready. After hanging up, Kira shared the news with the others, who welcomed her with more hugs and words of encouragement. You deserve this, Kira, Maya said, smiling. Jalen agreed. It's an opportunity to continue making a difference, now from a position of even greater influence. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, added, and think of the example this will set for other institutions. It's a victory in every sense. Kira nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude and hope. You're right. But before I make any decisions, there's something I need to do. That afternoon, Kira visited Millennium Park, the place where everything had really begun with her meeting with Eleanor. Sitting by the Cloud Gate, she reflected on the journey of the last few months, the difficulties, the tears, but also the strength and solidarity she had found. As she watched the people passing by, Kira noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Eleanor, the former employee of the Central Supermarket who had risked everything to help them. I heard the news, Eleanor said, taking a seat next to Kira. You did it, Kira. You've really turned things around. Kira smiled, tears in her eyes. We did it, Eleanor. All of us. Your courage in speaking out is what made it all possible. The two women were silent for a moment, gazing at the city that had been the scene of their struggle. What are you going to do now? Eleanor asked. Kira took a deep breath, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced for months. I'm going to keep fighting. For justice, for equality, for a better world. Only now, I know I'm not alone in this fight. As the sun began to set, painting the Chicago sky in shades of orange and pink, Kira felt a deep sense of purpose and hope. The storm had passed, and although the road ahead might still have challenges, she was ready to face them. With one last look at the Cloud Gate, reflecting the lights of the city and the promises of a new tomorrow, Kira stood up, ready to write the next chapter of her story. A story of courage, perseverance and, above all, the unshakable force of truth. If you were faced with systematic injustice in your community or workplace, would you be willing to risk your career and reputation to expose the truth, even if you knew it could have significant personal consequences? What would you do differently or the same as Kira? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.